I am Serena, and for a long time, people laughed at me before they even knew me. My own dad made fun of me in front of many people like I was a joke. For many years I told myself that maybe he was just clumsy, that maybe I was too sensitive, and that calling me ugly or lazy was his way of teasing me. But one night at a big party he did it on a microphone with everyone looking at us. Something inside me finally woke up that night. I remember my face getting hot before I even remember the words. One moment I was just another guest at my own child's wedding, trying to disappear. The next moment I was standing under everyone's eyes, feeling their quiet laughter. I could feel every insecurity I had ever carried piling up on my shoulders at once. My dad had spent years criticizing my body, my worth, and my efforts, and all of it came crashing down in that single, awful introduction. What made it worse was that I thought I was safe that day. I wore a quiet dress, kept my head down, and practiced safe answers about my life so no one would ask too many questions. I had spent many years building a part of myself that was competent, respected, and not judged for how I looked. I kept this part away from my family, especially my dad. So when a group of men in matching suits suddenly walked forward and spoke about my life out loud, I felt the ground inside me shift. My dad's joke crashed head-on into the truth he never cared to ask about. In that crash I saw the image he made of me start to break. If you have ever stood frozen while your own parents made you into entertainment, you know that the real question is not what they said, but what you do after everyone hears it. How I acted after my dad choked on his wine would change my family forever. Before I tell you what he said and what happened after, I want to ask, what time is it for you right now and where are you reading this from? I'm curious how far this story will reach. Looking back, the cracks inside me started long before I understood them. Growing up in our small part of Raleigh, I learned quickly that the safest way to live in my family was to make myself smaller, even before I knew what that meant. My dad spoke in a way that made every room feel tight, like he carried a storm wherever he went. A simple breakfast could turn into a test, and a normal family moment could become a stage where I always failed. He seemed to think belittling me was helping me. My mom tried to love quietly but worried a lot. She often didn't stop him, not because she agreed, but because fights in our house always left a mark and she learned to avoid his temper. My brother seemed to float above it all. He fit the mold my dad liked. Confident, strong, and eager to take up space. Watching him get praised made the difference between us even clearer. I remember feeling observed before I had words for it. I could feel eyes measuring me in the kitchen, casually judging me at the table. I started expecting criticism before it even came. Over time, expecting criticism became the same as experiencing it. I didn't need to hear mean words to feel hurt. I learned that silence could protect me, but it could also trap me. I kept my thoughts inside and convinced myself that being invisible might give me peace. I learned to eat fast, answer briefly, and step aside so others wouldn't notice me. This became a habit, a strategy in my bones. My dad never noticed the damage he caused. He believed he had all the authority. He didn't see me holding my breath when he entered the room. Growing older, life at home became predictable but exhausting. My mom tried small comforts like squeezing my shoulder or giving a quiet look across the hall, but it couldn't make up for the hurt inside me. My brother, shielded from what I went through, didn't understand my tight chest or how I counted minutes until I could be alone. I never blamed him. He just had a happier experience growing up. What scared me most was how easily I accepted my place in the family. I believed I deserved to be judged, that my value depended on making myself small. I didn't know to question it yet. I just felt a quiet ache to live a life where I wasn't a target. Even now, when I think of those years, I don't picture events as much as feelings. The heaviness in my stomach when footsteps came. The calm I forced when I sensed a remark. The pride I felt when I didn't react. These instincts shaped how I moved through the world. By the time I realized I needed to escape that pattern, bracing for impact felt as natural as breathing. When I became an adult, I finally got to breathe. Leaving home felt like slipping out of a shell that had grown too tight. I didn't have a big plan or ambition. I just needed distance from the version of myself shaped by constant scrutiny. When I joined the Air Force, it wasn't courage that guided me. I just wanted a place where I didn't have to brace for the next blow. Boot camp was shocking. The discipline, the structure, the fast pace, all felt strange at first. But strangely, I felt comfort in its fairness. Everyone was being built up or torn down, not compared. No one judged me like my dad. Everyone was measured by effort, endurance, and consistency. This fairness made challenges feel freeing. Weeks passed and I discovered parts of myself I didn't know existed. I learned I could push through exhaustion, that my voice mattered, and that people listened without questioning my right to speak. Confidence I'd never been allowed to explore started to grow in small steps. When I was chosen for logistics training, something shifted. I found strengths hidden under years of self-doubt. I got good at planning, solving problems, and organizing people. Leadership felt natural when I didn't shrink away. Every task completed and every evaluation passed added layers to the identity I was building, one that had nothing to do with the girl who once flinched at footsteps. My career moved forward steadily. I earned respect from people who judged me by my work, not by my looks. I led teams, coordinated operations, and found belonging I had never known. The world finally reflected a version of me that was capable and reliable. That reflection carried me forward, shaping my choices with a steadiness I never thought I had. Even as I built this strong version of myself, my past followed me quietly. I would catch myself shrinking in rooms, waiting for the shadow of judgment that I had carried for years. Some days it felt like the past was whispering in my ear, telling me I was too much or not enough. But I learned to notice these whispers and let them pass. I started to recognize that my father's opinions were not rules I had to follow. My worth was not decided by how small I could make myself. It was hard at first. Old habits die slowly. I sometimes caught myself holding my breath when someone entered a room, tensing up when a comment was made, or feeling ashamed for enjoying praise. I had to remind myself, you belong here. You have value. Your voice matters. And little by little those reminders became true. The more I practiced speaking up and believing in myself, the more I could finally see the real me. The me that had always been inside but had been hidden under years of fear. There were moments when I doubted if I was strong enough to face my dad again, to see him without shrinking inside. But I realized that strength wasn't about fighting him. It was about understanding that his opinion didn't define me. Strength was knowing that I could live my life without letting his words control my heart. As I continued to grow, I noticed other people starting to see the new me. My friends, coworkers, and even strangers responded to the person I had worked so hard to become. I was no longer the quiet girl who disappeared at family gatherings. I was someone who could stand tall, take up space, and be proud of what I had achieved. And with each step, I realized that the cracks my father had helped create were no longer weaknesses. They were places where light came in. Looking back, I see that my childhood taught me lessons I didn't understand at the time. I learned about patience, endurance, and resilience. I learned what it felt like to fight for a place in the world, even when the people who were supposed to protect me didn't. And I learned that even when the people you love fail you, you can still rise. I also began to notice that I was not alone in these feelings. Many people have parents or family members who hurt them, sometimes without meaning to. I realized that my story could help others see that it's possible to grow strong even after being made to feel small. It's possible to create a life that belongs to you, where your worth is not judged by someone else's expectations. My journey taught me that life is not about the jokes other people make at your expense, nor is it about shrinking to fit into someone else's idea of who you should be. Life is about finding your own voice, your own power, and your own peace. I had spent so many years hiding, shrinking, and trying to survive. But when I finally stepped into adulthood, I realized survival was not enough. I wanted to thrive. I wanted to build a life that reflected my value, not my dad's opinion. Every time I see a new challenge or a difficult moment, I remind myself of the girl who once flinched at footsteps in the hallway. I honor her by showing that she was brave enough to survive, patient enough to learn, and strong enough to grow. That little girl shaped me, but she does not control me anymore. I am Serenia, fully, without apology. I know that people will sometimes judge me just like my father did, and sometimes it will hurt. But I have learned that their words are not the rules of my life. I have a voice, a presence, and a right to be seen. And I will use them. The night of my child's wedding was the moment when everything collided. The jokes, the truth, the hidden life I had built. And in that collision I discovered something powerful. I could choose how to respond. I could choose to let my father's words define me, or I could choose to define myself. I chose the second. And that choice changed my family forever, even if they didn't realize it at first. Now, as I think about my journey from a girl who flinched in hallways to a woman who leads, I feel a sense of pride that is quiet but steady. It is not pride based on what my father or anyone else thinks. It is pride based on truth. I survived, I grew, and I became the person I was meant to be. I want every person reading this, young or old, to know that they can do the same. No one's words, not even a parent's, can truly control you unless you let them. You can build yourself piece by piece with patience, courage, and love. And even if your past has hurt you, it can also be a source of strength if you let it teach you instead of holding you back. The path is not easy. Some days are heavy. Some moments bring back old fears. But the difference is now I see them coming. I recognize them. And I face them without shrinking. That is the gift of the years I spent learning to survive. I can now live fully. I can now stand tall. I can now shine. I am Serena. I am the daughter who once was a joke. And now, I am the woman who shows the world that I am worth more than laughter, more than judgment, and more than anyone else's opinion. And every day I grow stronger, more confident, and more fully myself. Marriage came into my life when everything around me was changing very fast. I had just been through a period in my life when nothing felt steady. I met someone who seemed to understand the tiredness I carried from always moving and trying to handle so many responsibilities. At first, our relationship felt strong. It was like we were quietly building a team together. Two people trying to work on busy jobs, trying to support each other, and trying to find small moments of happiness. But as time went on, our life together started to shake. There were pressures we couldn't fully explain or understand. We both tried to hold things together, but it wasn't easy. Our paths moved in different directions faster than we could adjust. Slowly, the distance between us became bigger, even though we were living in the same home. Then my son was born. Everything became very clear when I looked at him for the first time. Taking care of him gave my life something solid, like an anchor holding me steady in the middle of a storm. I suddenly understood what I needed to do. Even though my marriage ended, I felt a strength that had nothing to do with proving myself. It was about giving my son a good childhood, a life better than the one I had. Returning to Raleigh as a single mom was not easy. I had to learn how to manage everything on my own, from work to home to raising a child. But I carried with me the strength I had earned over the years. Being in the Air Force had taught me discipline, responsibility, and how to stay strong even when life was difficult. I had learned not to let shame or fear control me. By the time I settled into our small home, I realized I had started a new chapter of life that I had built entirely on my own. Life became calmer as my son began to find his own place in the world. Watching him grow brought me a joy I had not expected. Each milestone he reached felt like proof that I was breaking the patterns from my past. I could see my own discipline in the way he handled responsibilities. But he had a confidence I had never known. He faced challenges without fear or hesitation, unlike me. Watching him gave me hope and pride. When he moved into his first apartment near downtown Raleigh, I had to adjust to a quieter home. The silence no longer felt heavy or lonely. Instead, it felt like a peaceful stage in life where I could finally breathe. I poured my energy into my work, into routines that kept me grounded, and into giving my son the space to become his own person. He visited often, so the distance between us never grew into worry. I learned to enjoy the balance we had built together, a balance between independence and family. My son met a soul during a workshop he attended for a project he was leading. Their friendship grew slowly at first. It was subtle, showing up in his conversations like a gentle addition. Over time, I got to know her better. She was confident and calm, asking thoughtful questions and understanding situations quickly. The most special thing about her was how she treated people. She always showed respect, not like an act she had to perform, but like it was a natural part of who she was. Seeing my son drawn to someone kind and grounded made me feel warm inside. It was a feeling I could not easily name. Meeting her family added another layer to the experience. They were calm, polite, and careful in the way they spoke and acted. Even though their life and background were different from mine, they made me aware of myself. They did not make me feel unwelcome, but I felt like I was being quietly observed. It reminded me that no matter how far I had come, the urge to shrink and feel small could still rise without warning. When the engagement was announced, the wedding plans began quickly. They chose a beautiful hall downtown, a place where everything sparkled under soft lighting, and every corner seemed planned with care. The thought of being there as the groom's mother made me feel proud but also nervous. I was proud of my son and the man he had become, but weddings also bring attention. I had spent most of my life trying to avoid too much attention. The planning meetings, dress fittings, and discussions about seating arrangements all went smoothly. Yet I still felt pressure beneath the surface. Some of it came from the size of the event, but part of it came from knowing that my father would be there. I had not seen him in years. We had quietly agreed to keep our distance. Knowing he would be at the wedding made me nervous. It felt like an old wound was about to open. I tried to prepare myself not for a fight but for the possibility of feeling exposed again. Even with all I had achieved, I knew that his presence could make me feel small in an instant. The day of the wedding arrived, carrying a strange mix of calm and tension. I had prepared myself as best I could. I chose a dress that made me feel steady rather than flashy. I took slow, deep breaths before stepping out of my car and moving toward the hall. Nothing about the setting felt overwhelming. But the awareness that my father was inside lingered like a tightness in my chest. I wanted the focus to be on my son and the new life he was starting. That thought guided every step I took as I entered the hall. Inside, people gathered in small groups, greeting each other warmly. I moved quietly, nodding and smiling politely, happy to watch and not be at the center of attention. My son looked calm and ready, and seeing him like that grounded me. I reminded myself that my presence mattered to him. That alone gave me the determination to stay steady, no matter what the day might bring. Soon I felt a shift in the atmosphere. I didn't need to turn around to know my father had arrived. He has a way of making his presence known without saying much. I felt the old tension rise, quiet but fast. I tried to stay out of his way, hoping he would talk to others. But in large events, it is hard to avoid people. Eventually he approached. I could feel his presence before he reached the group near me. His arrival caused a pause, as if the air itself was waiting. He had always liked moments like this. The attention, the tension, the chance to control a room. Then it happened quickly. He stepped into the conversation near me, positioning himself in a way that forced me into the center. Before I could step back, he introduced me not to inform others but to make a joke at my expense. At that moment, I felt the sting of being made into a spectacle. People around us laughed awkwardly, unsure how to respond. I felt heat rise in my chest, a familiar mix of shame and anger. For a moment I could not move. Years of practice kept my face still, but inside I felt twisted. I had thought I was prepared, but nothing could soften the blow of being diminished in front of strangers on my son's wedding day. Shame and anger collided, making everything blur around me. Then a new presence appeared. A group of groomsmen I recognized from long ago moved forward calmly. I had not expected to see them here. They were dressed in matching suits and carried themselves with quiet strength I remembered well. Their arrival disrupted the tension. They shifted the attention away from my father and brought calm to the room. In the moments that followed, the entire room seemed to change. People who had been laughing politely went quiet, as if trying to understand what had just happened. I watched my father's confidence falter. He realized that I was not the person he had thought I was. I realized that our relationship would never be the same. The energy in the room had shifted in ways I had not expected. People who had been comfortable moments ago were now silent, trying to reconcile two very different images of me. It was clear that the past and present were meeting in the same space. I felt a strange sense of peace. Even though the situation had been difficult, I knew that I had stood my ground. I had maintained my composure and my dignity, and that mattered more than anything else in the room. As the evening went on, I continued to watch my son and Isolde. They looked happy and calm. Their family and friends were celebrating, laughing, and enjoying the day. I realized that my own fears and worries had been important lessons. They had taught me how to stay strong, how to be steady, and how to protect my own peace. I felt proud, not just of my son but of myself. I had grown, and I had taught him what strength and dignity looked like. By the end of the night, the wedding felt complete and joyful. My father's presence had not ruined the moment. Instead, it showed me how far I had come. I had learned to face difficult moments without shrinking. I had learned that my life, my choices, and my strength could not be diminished by anyone. My son had started a new chapter, and I was ready to continue mine, proud, steady, and free. My dad tried to make himself the most important person in the room, like he always did. He walked in with confidence, like he always thought he was the center of attention. But this time it didn't work. The confidence he carried in when he came in slowly faded, like a candle burning out. I could feel people looking at me in a new way. It wasn't because they felt sorry for me, and it wasn't because they were curious about me. It was because they finally understood something about me. That understanding made the room feel heavier, like the air itself had changed. I didn't say anything, and I didn't move right away. I needed a moment to calm myself. I needed to gather my thoughts and put them in a safe place so they wouldn't spill out or get mixed up. Standing nearby were the groomsmen. They were quiet, but their presence felt strong. Just the way they stood made me feel safe. I didn't even need to hear their words. Their quiet confidence created a kind of shield around me that I had never realized I needed before. Because of them, I felt a little lighter inside. It wasn't because everything was solved, but because I could finally show who I really was without having to hide it from my dad. As the talking and laughing in the room slowly started again, I noticed a change. People acted differently toward me. Their faces looked softer. The way they asked me questions felt real, not just polite. The way they spoke changed from small, empty talk to something honest and meaningful. It was like the room itself understood a version of me that had never been seen before when my dad was around. I accepted their kindness slowly and carefully, still thinking about everything that had happened, but I felt grateful for the calm it brought me. During a quiet moment at the party, my son came to me. He looked at me with an expression that held so many feelings I couldn't name. I could see pride, surprise, and a kind of protectiveness in his face. It flickered in ways that reminded me how much he had grown. He had grown beyond the shadows of the past, beyond the difficult things I had gone through. I didn't need to explain anything to him. Over the years we had built a quiet understanding, and it was still strong. He didn't ask questions and he didn't look for reassurance. He just offered his presence. Just being there with me made me feel grounded, like I could finally breathe again. Throughout the evening I kept my actions calm and careful. I congratulated the bride and groom, thanked the guests who spoke to me kindly, and stayed away from anything that might cause more trouble. My dad stayed on the other side of the hall. He was surrounded by people who no longer seemed interested in listening to him or indulging his usual behavior. He avoided looking at me, and it felt like he knew he wasn't ready to face what had happened. I didn't go to him, and I didn't feel like I needed to. I didn't need to give him another chance to make me feel small. The way things were between us had already changed, and I could feel it settling quietly around us, like a stone that had finally found its place. As the party slowly came to an end, I felt something inside me. It wasn't joy or triumph, and it wasn't relief. It was a quiet clarity. Something had ended, and I didn't need to fix it. I didn't need to pick it apart or make it better. When it was time to leave, I said goodbye to a few people quietly, and I walked out into the cool night air. I didn't look back. I knew the distance between my dad and me had grown in a way that couldn't be fixed. Leaving didn't feel like running away. It felt like the first honest step toward a life where I could choose which parts of my past could stay with me and which parts one could leave behind. The days after the wedding were quiet. I had time to think about everything that had happened. I went back to my normal routines, doing tasks and chores the way I always had, moving carefully through each day. But inside me something had changed. Something final had settled. A boundary I had been forming for decades had finally taken shape. I didn't feel like I needed to explain my feelings or question whether my emotions were fair or deserved. The moment at the party had shown me a truth I could no longer ignore. Accepting it didn't feel like a choice anymore. It felt like something I had been waiting a long time to do. Later, my dad sent me a message. His words sounded familiar, like he was trying to smooth things over without really understanding them. His message tried to make the situation seem small, like nothing important had happened. He didn't show any sign that he understood the weight of the moment, or that he even realized what it meant. That hurt more than the original problem. It confirmed something I had sensed for most of my life. He had never truly seen me, and he wasn't going to start now. I decided to meet him for coffee. I didn't do it because I had to. I did it because I needed to understand for myself. Sitting across from him, I realized how much effort I had spent over the years just to keep even the smallest connection with him. He spoke with the same certainty he always had, expecting me to fall into the familiar pattern of silence or uneasy agreement. But I no longer felt the need to carry that weight. I listened to him, letting his words pass without taking them inside me. Finally, I told him I was stepping away from our relationship, saying it felt like letting out a breath I had been holding for far too long. He reacted with disbelief and then irritation, insisting I was overreacting. His refusal to understand made my decision even stronger. I didn't argue with him or try to convince him to see things from my point of view. There was no reason to fight for recognition or attention from someone who had never freely given it. When I stood up and walked out of the cafe, the distance between us felt complete. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It was a quiet truth that had finally settled in. Walking out, I didn't feel victorious or relieved. I wasn't angry anymore. I felt something new, space. An open feeling I had never known before. It let me think about my life without carrying him with me all the time. I knew life wouldn't be free of old memories or complicated feelings. But for the first time, I understood that I had permission to move forward, to make choices for myself, and to live my life without having to include him. The ending with my dad wasn't clean, neat, or easy. It just existed. Real and unresolved, leaving me to live my life based on my own choices. What happened afterward didn't need an explanation. Some relationships end without big closure, without forgiveness, or without a final conversation that makes everything tidy. Mine did. The lack of resolution became its own kind of truth. One I could finally accept. Her story is important because it shows a reality that many people know but rarely talk about. Not every parent is willing to grow or change. Not every wound can be softened with time. Serena's journey shows that being strong is not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes being strong is quiet. Sometimes it is the quiet decision to walk away. Sometimes it is realizing that your dignity matters more than tradition. Sometimes it is understanding that self-respect can be reclaimed at any age. That strength comes from choosing yourself even when it feels difficult or unfair. Serena's story teaches that it is okay to step back from people who hurt you, even if they are your family. It is okay to let go when someone doesn't see or respect you. Life is long and we have the right to protect our hearts. We have the right to decide which parts of the past can come with us and which parts should stay behind. We can make new paths for ourselves. We can create lives where we feel safe, seen, and valued. And we can do it quietly, without fighting, without shouting, and without needing anyone else's permission. Her journey reminds us that endings don't have to be loud to be real. They don't need to have apologies or happy resolutions. Some endings exist simply because they are true. Some endings exist because they are necessary. And some endings, like Serena's, exist to make space for something new. A life shaped by our own choices, our own understanding, and our own strength. The quiet strength she shows is powerful because it doesn't rely on anyone else's approval. It doesn't need the world to notice. It doesn't need the story to be wrapped up neatly. It only needs the person living it to know the truth. And that truth is enough. It is enough to heal, to move forward, and to finally live a life that feels fully your own.